You've seen the review, you know the essentials. Now it's time to take a deep dive into one of the top TVs of the year. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and if you haven't seen my review of the LG G1 OLED Evo, the link is in the description. You might want to see that first, but when you're done, come right back here because this is where we're going to go even deeper into the TV. The thing is, LG packed so much into this TV that there's just no way we could do it in one video without it going super long. So here we are, about to dig into the deeper, dare I say, geekier side of this TV. We're going to take yet another look at the picture settings, talk some more about all the AI processing, talk about Evo, how it works and what it does for you, some tips and tricks with WebOS and the new Magic Motion remote, gaming, of course, and take another look at some Dolby Vision content and why it may be looking too dark. I'm ready to have some fun with this, so let's do it. Before I dive in, though, I'm curious if you like the idea of me doing two different review videos like we're doing for this one. Leave me a comment about that, and while you're down there, please click the like and subscribe button so we can push past 1 million subs. Super important for us. And as always, we've got shopping links to the products we cover, so you can always support this channel that way if you like, and I hope you do like. Okay, with that, let's dig in. So, picture settings. I've had quite a ride with this TV trying to figure them out. First off, there's some odd stuff afoot. Even after a factory reset of the TV, some of the picture presets seem to have been altered because I contacted LG and they were like, no, that's not right at all. Even though the TV took me through the first time setup wizard when I went into ISF Bright, the color temp was cool. And this is not normal, which makes sense because the ISF is all about standards. Same for Cinema Home for HDR. That setting was set at Cool 20 when I got into it, but in fact, LG confirms that the default is supposed to be Warm 50, which also makes more sense. So, ghost in the TV? I don't know. Where we get into Dolby Vision, it gets a little more confusing. See, with Dolby Vision, Dolby gets to dictate how Dolby Vision gets implemented in TVs. That's part of the appeal. It's an end-to-end solution with reliable standards. So in the case of the LG G1, things just look different than we're used to. In many other TVs, you get Dolby Vision Bright and Dolby Vision Dark, pretty cut and dry. But in the LG G1, you can actually pick some of LG's picture presets that sort of overlay over Dolby Vision. In this case, Dolby Vision Cinema Home replaces Dolby Vision Bright, and so we should expect it to be brighter. Now, I noted in the review that choosing Dolby Cinema Home seemed to force some motion smoothing, but if we go into the AI services menu and we turn auto genre detection to off, it will not force cinematic movement. That's LG's latest motion smoothing option meant to reduce judder in 24 frame per second movies and the flashing that can come with it since OLED pixels are so instantly responsive. As you can see now, the option is no longer locked and we can choose what we want for motion handling in Cinema Home. So I suppose the takeaway here is that the cinema preset really is for those watching in a dark, dedicated room with lighting, similar to what you might get at a movie theater. And Cinema Home has been designed to be more like what LG thinks is going to resonate with the largest audience. It's more accurate in terms of color temperature than, say, standard mode, and it isn't too heavy-handed with motion smoothing, but it is brighter, and LG takes some liberties with some of the other processing it thinks will work best for most folks. So for you at home, I would suggest starting with Cinema Home and then tweaking it to where you want it to be. For me, that's amping up peak brightness, disabling some of the AI processing, including auto genre detection, and then disabling motion smoothing. I do think that auto genre detection can be handy though, in that it attempts to optimize the picture based on the incoming video signal, and for those who aren't super geeky about TV settings, it delivers a good user experience. For example, the TV can detect it's displaying a movie, and during a night scene in that movie, it can optimize the picture so that details in the shadows don't get washed out. It raises the blacks, but only temporarily, so that when it gets to a daytime scene, you still get your super inky blacks where you want them. Some of the other AI elements can be handy too. AI brightness, for instance, adds another layer of brightness control, but it's automated so that you get the brightness when you need it and not when you don't. AI Picture Pro, I've noticed, can help clean up dirty images a bit better than when it's left off. So I'll say this, play around with these AI options, see what you think of them. Just know that as you turn them on, you may be restricting control in other parts of the picture settings menu. Now let's talk about Evo. This is a name that LG has given to its new, brighter OLED TVs. Right now, Evo is only available in LG G1 televisions, but we may see that change in future years. Maybe Evo comes down to the C series next year. That would be pretty huge. But there seems to be some confusion about how Evo works. LG has been pretty clear with me. It's not just a new panel, It's also how their processing is handling brightness decisions, particularly in HDR and Dolby Vision, and that's in conjunction with the new panel. I'll explain best I can. The new OLED panel used in the Evo televisions has some notable changes, and this gets a little technical and sciencey, but I'm going to do my best without dumbing it down too much. So colors like red, blue, and green are segments of the color spectrum. Broadly speaking, red, for example, is made up by a specific set of wavelengths in the spectrum, but pure red, like the purest red, is an extremely narrow wavelength. So if we try to picture this on a graph, a not so pure red would take up a lot of horizontal space on a graph and not have a very high peak. A pure red would be very narrow on the graph and have a very high peak. So what LG did is refine its OLED panel so that the red pixel has that higher, narrower peak, and they did the same for blue. As for green, that pixel tended to lean a little toward the yellow side of the spectrum before, so LG figured out how to shift it a bit to be more firmly in green territory, and it too has a pretty good peak. So now that we have more pure versions of red and blue and a more accurate version of green, the combined effect is better color accuracy and brighter resulting colors. The white subpixel in an OLED can also be used more effectively to boost brightness, and well, there you have it, a brighter OLED panel. Then comes the processing part of things, which decides which pixels are going to get power, how much power should be sent, and for how long it should be sent. Now, LG isn't going to give up the goods here, but you can imagine that making smarter decisions about what to make bright and what not to make so bright allows the TV to reach those peak nits in very specific areas just when they're needed. In the end, we just sense a brighter TV. And because the processing is in play, it can make measuring real scene peak brightness a bit tricky because sometimes energy is focused in a really small area. This is what I mean when I say measurements don't always tell the whole story. Sometimes you just have to step back and look at it. That's why I'm going to do a comparison between this new LG Evo set and last year's C10 OLED. I think seeing the difference side by side is going to reveal a lot. Now let's take a deeper look into WebOS. In the review, we took a pretty broad look at the new design. It's darker, easier to read, feels familiar, a bit like Google TV in some ways, but it can do a lot more than just help you find and start streaming shows from your favorite apps. One feature I think sports fans will like is the sports alert feature. You can set up alerts by the particular sport or take it right down to team level. The TV will alert you when your favorite team is playing so you can tune in. And if you decide to go watch a different game or another show entirely, the alerts will keep you posted on the score. Moving along now to gaming, we touched on this a little bit in the review, but this game optimizer specifically is worth diving into a little bit more. So you already know that the LG OLED comes with 4 HDMI 2.1 ports and is G-Sync compatible as well as FreeSync Premium compatible. Whatever you want to connect, the G1 can handle it. This game optimizer is new though. LG is really leaning into being the best gaming TV you can buy, and this dashboard is a big part of that. So if we pull this up, you can see right at the top whether you want to have game optimizer turned on or not. And then just below that, it will give you an at-a-glance look at what the major current settings are. This would let you know if you needed to pop in and change something. Below that, you get into some game genre settings. If you select first-person shooter, the TV will adjust the tone curve to raise the darkest blacks just a bit so you can see enemies hiding in the shadows, for instance. I've already found this to be a pretty handy feature. The others here are more incremental improvements. Real-time strategy offers even lighting across the entire game. So if you're used to having vignetting in the corners of the game, this is going to even things out so that you can see the whole map clearly all at once. RPG is a setting for role-playing games where the emphasis needs to be placed on the main character. And then there's standard, which really just means the system isn't doing anything special, just handling the game as it normally would. No special picture adjustments. Reduced blue light does what it suggests. If you're sitting in front of screens for long periods of time, blue light can really strain your eyes. This is meant to make things more comfortable for marathon gaming sessions. Lag adjustments is also fairly straightforward. LG does allow some processing when in game mode to make the picture look great, but if you give the lag reduction a boost here, you may lose some of the picture quality, but this drops lag as far down as it can go, which may be what those playing competitive FPS games actually want. Then you get into these black and white stabilizers, and I can show you what it does when we make these adjustments. Earlier, I mentioned intentionally raising the tone curve a bit to get better visibility into shadowy areas. This is just manual control of that. So you can make adjustment until the game's picture looks like it's where you want it, and then go from there. I do recommend bringing this back to the default when done because the settings for one game will not be the same for another. And also, if you use your console for streaming TV and movies, you probably don't want this raising the blacks. or overly juicing those bright areas. Enhanced audio basically lets you turn AI game sound on and off. Here's another thing you want to experiment with. Depending on the game, you may find it really enhances the experience. Generally though, I think the TV sounds best in its standard mode, which is why I don't use AI Sound Pro when watching movies and TV. Smooth Picture is really about variable refresh rate, or VRR. You can enable VRR or turn it off, and you can select specifically G-Sync or FreeSync if you're playing a title on an appropriate console, which supports this. This is just going to implement the standards for either G-Sync or FreeSync. So you may notice, for instance, that turning FreeSync on may darken the image. That's why we have another area to calibrate the darkness and brightness here, because when you're in VRR, those earlier adjustments are no longer in play. So when we take a step back and just play games on the TV, I've noticed it works exceptionally well. There are tons of picture quality changes that happen when you're in 4K 60 versus 4K 120, with HDR on or off, and with VRR on or off. The good news is that LG has put the power to adjust the PQ curve in the user's hand, which is something we've never seen before. Just another reason why LG's G1 and C1 OLEDs are really the best option for gamers out there right now, in my opinion. Now, a quick word about Dolby Vision titles. I mentioned in the review some of the titles I watched were exceptionally dark in certain scenes, and that's definitely true. But what I've found is that it varies widely by the title. Some titles don't have this problem at all. What I found out by talking to various people in the industry is that Dolby Vision kind of represents whatever the creator's intent was. So if the colorist did that, if they made it intentionally dark because they were in a dark cave and they could see it just fine and they figured that's how you're gonna watch TV, then that's how it comes out. That Captain Marvel scene, kind of intentional. And you know what? This really reminds me of that one Game of Thrones episode, which was like insanely dark. And people were like, what is going on? How come I can't really see what's happening here? As a matter of fact, the only way you could see some detail was on an OLED TV. And the response was, well, this is what the creator's intent was. And folks were like, screw creator's intent. I want to see the show. So I think we're looking at something similar here, where it really just depends on the title and how it was handled, because as I've noticed, it's not just this TV. I'm seeing these dark titles everywhere. So if you run into this, just understand that seems to be the nature of the beast right now. And that's our deep dive, everyone. So much to explore with this TV, but I think that's why I think so highly of it. It's not just another TV, it's a whole different kind of TV experience. Thanks as always, everyone. Now that you've learned more, are you even more interested in the G1? Leave me a comment about that down below and let me know if you like this deep dive idea. As always, please like and subscribe, and here's 2 other videos I think you'll like.